Here's a healthy mature ash tree, Fraxinus excelsior, a real beauty. The crown shows no sign of ash dieback disease, sadly an unusual sight in 2021, and there are several diseased ashes in the lane opposite. Now that it's been identified, this tree's condition can be monitored. If disease does not proceed, it could be because the tree has genes for resistance and could provide seed for the restoration of Britain's endangered ash population. Here we compare that healthy tree with a badly infected one, sadly one of many in the National Nature Reserve protected specifically because it is, or was, fine ash woodland on limestone. If we look up to the tops of the trees, those unaffected are fully foliated, while infected trees have bare branches. If we could reach, we'd find the twigs are brittle, dead, and death descends until the tree itself is dead. There is no known way to stop it, and the disease, having at last arrived in its farthest northern reaches, is now fully established throughout Britain. The Forestry Commission's website says of ash dieback disease, Callara dieback of ash is a serious disease of ash trees caused by a fungus called Hymenoscyphus fraxineus. It causes leaf loss and crown dieback and is usually fatal in younger trees, whereas mortality in older trees is more often associated with the combined impact of pathogens such as the honey fungus Armillaria mellia. It has caused widespread damage to ash populations across Europe and was first discovered in the UK in a Buckinghamshire nursery in February 2012. Management efforts are now focused on mitigating safety risks from diseased trees while allowing for natural regeneration of potentially disease-tolerant or resistant trees wherever possible. Ash dieback is well established in England, Wales, Northern Ireland and central Scotland, and probably more widespread in the Highlands than is suggested by this map. SLEF has begun a community-involving local ash dieback survey in the conspicuously under-recorded Skye and Loch Alsh region. Although now widespread in Britain, predicted to equal Dutch elm disease in its potential impact on the landscape, ash dieback has so far been officially recorded in only 30 or so places in the Highlands. The two 10-kilometre square localities emphasised in red here represent just two 2019 sightings by just two local biologists, one near Duisdale on Skye and the other in the Author's Garden in Ochtertyre, Loch Alsh. Public awareness is limited, so the map is probably unrepresentative of the actual situation with ash dieback, likely to be pretty alarming. In early summer 2021, the author began noticing many dieback-affected trees near his home, particularly within the village of Ochtertyre and alongside the A87 between Nosty and Ardelve. There can be little doubt that, with raised awareness, ash dieback will be recognised in many other places, such as recently by Loch Ness, south of Drumnadrochit. In contrast, during a car window survey during the same outing, travelling the A862 from Inverness to Beaulieu, no obvious ash dieback was so evident as at the previously mentioned sites, though we note that it has already been recorded there. When the author contacted the Forestry Commission in 2019 to report that ash saplings in his garden were dying of suspected dieback, he was informed that there were few records for the Highlands, a situation that looks likely to change dramatically. Samples provided were confirmed to be the suspected disease. Around the same time, two of us visited a dense colony of young ashes surrounding the fallen carcass of their deceased ancestor. Many, actually most, were found to be suffering from ash dieback, as were groups of saplings farther away in the adjacent woodland. A recent informal survey of the ash trees in Ochtertyre showed that all, mature and sapling trees are affected, many of the latter pretty well dead, or with a final desperate flush of vegetation emerging from the base of the trunk. All of the mature trees have leafless crowns of dead sticks, of varying severity, mostly advanced. The first signs trees infected by ash dieback show is leaves wilting and the withering of terminal shoots. We rarely notice this happening, but we do once the dying shoots turn brown and crisp, falling away, leaving leafless branches which are soon dead. The following year, buds fail to open. The branches or twigs are naked, brown and brittle. The disease progresses rapidly from the branches to the trunk, then down to ground level as the trees literally die back. The bark of live young ash is grey-green, but brown when diseased. We have yet to detect dead adult trees in Loch Alsh, though sadly that looks bound to change within the coming few years. Here we look up into the dying canopy of the Dusdale group of young ashes. Their young trunks clearly show the disease descending. Ash dieback has a distinctive scar at the junction of healthy and affected wood. We have yet to detect any dead adult trees in Loch Alsh, though doubtless continued monitoring will soon change that. Pessimistic, but probably true. Those we have looked at are all alive, but with varying degrees of dying back, in some cases really severe. The situation is very different with the saplings, many of which are stone dead, or dead except for a few leafy shoots, optimistically growing up from the yet-to-be infected trunk base, for the time being at a safe distance from the descending disease. The flank of Ochtertyre Hill above the village supports some fine woodland, including on its margin a group of splendid ash trees. They're seen here in 2011, close to, and here at a distance from the edge of the village. At the time they looked healthy enough and we had no suspicion of the troubles they were going to have to face. In the first catastrophe, which happened on the night of the 3rd of April 2013, the entire hillside from Braintree to Ochtertyre was ravaged by a massive wildfire that engulfed the Ochtertyre woodland. But the mature trees, including the ashes seen here bravely enduring an utter inferno, they all survived. "3 years later you wouldn't know there had been a fire, though who knows what subtle ecological damage is not detected by just looking at the scene. For instance, snails gathered in cool spots before, in huge numbers, being eradicated by the intense heat. How long might it take for renewal populations to establish? Hundreds of little ash trees growing beneath the bracken were just burnt to a frazzle. Did their parents manage to establish a new generation before the next catastrophe struck? Here we go, ash dieback. It's 5 years since we thought the trees were just fine, but that has changed. The hillside ashes have ash dieback, and we can see that the one on the left is severely infected. There can be little hope for them. Just 5 years, and what a difference. We'll zoom in. Along with every ash throughout the village of Ochtertyre, there can be little hope for these trees. But we'll keep watching in case one of them turns out to be resistant. What can we, the public, do about ash dieback? When Dutch elm disease struck, many of the trees were cut down and destroyed. With ash, it has been decided to leave the trees and monitor them, allowing resistant individuals to thrive in the hope that one day the ash population will become naturally reinstated from surviving resistant trees. We can spot, record and report instances of ash dieback, and more importantly, report trees like the tall one here that seem to be surviving the disease. They could well be the future of ash in Britain. Skye and Loch Alsh Environment Forum, popularly known as SLEF, now has a section of its website, slef.org.uk, dedicated to public involvement in ash dieback monitoring. You can submit your observations on a downloadable form and SLEF will forward the data to the appropriate authorities. The specific link is provided along with others relevant to the project in the notes below this video. Here's a view of woodland with many dead or dying ash saplings, but one seems to be doing a lot better. Or is it? That's what to look out for, examine carefully and predict its fate. If it looks promising as a survivor, then please report it. We'll also be on the lookout for healthy adult trees. Here on the skyline there are several ashes, mostly showing the now familiar signs of disease. But the one next door looks promising. Let's zoom in closer. It certainly looks a lot healthier than the other trees in these woods, and here we can see no bare twigs in the canopy. If it survives despite having diseased trees next door, well, as with the fine tree shown at the start of this presentation, this one will be worthwhile monitoring over the next few years. I wonder if the birds that flit from infected bough to infected bough are unwitting vectors for ash dieback, carrying spores from tree to tree. Finally, here's an incongruous juxtaposition: mountain ash or rowan growing next to moribund ash saplings. If for no other reason, it's useful to show the botanical differences.